Hey friends, it's me, Micah. This is the Homestead Bandwagon, out taking a break in the shade from mowing today. It's a little warm out. I'm trying out this Accelerator bagger. This is the greatest bagger on the market. I'm going to tell you why. Tell you some pros and cons about this type of bagger, and tell you why I personally would never buy one. Also tell you who else shouldn't buy one, because you see, I sell lawnmowers and I sell these Accelerator baggers. I get a lot of questions about them. I want to answer those questions. So let's just get into it, talking about this Accelerator bagger. What I really like about this bagger system is its simplicity. There's no moving parts to break. Well, there's a hatch on the back that you can remove, but virtually no moving parts to break, and nothing between the mower and the bagger. The bagger is just attached directly to the mower. There's a hole in it and the grass goes into it. So there's nothing to clog. So one of the big problems out here in Washington State, especially Western Washington, is it's so wet out here, baggers clog up. The hoses will clog up full of wet grass and not allow more grass through. Or if you have a impeller style system or a vacuum, that vacuum will get packed full of grass and the grass won't come through. These are virtually impossible to clog, which is why I really like them. The grass just comes out of the deck, goes into the hole. So if the grass can leave the deck, it will leave the deck into this thing and it'll fill up full of grass, and you can dump it once it's full. Now, what's really cool about this bagger is that it's made in the United States. It's actually made here in Washington State. Normally, we were seeing them with people who are doing commercial usage. Landscapers were using these, but now we're seeing them more and more on the residential market on stuff like this Bad Boy Magnum. Not a big fancy mower. This is just a residential mower that I wanted to try out with this bagger and see how it would work. We'll talk about that. Let's just get up close and personal with this thing, kind of show you what's going on. So this bagger, first of all, is just made of aluminum. It is hand welded. You will see that there are not perfect welds on it. It doesn't need to be perfect. Basically what you have here is a big metal bagger that just sticks on the side of your mower. So no tubes, no turbines, nothing to get clogged up. This thing will not clog. I've been using this all weekend on my place. It's pretty wet out here. Washington's always wet. The grass is thick. This thing will not clog because there's nothing to clog. You got a bunch of perforations all around it, which allow airflow, which cause vacuum, which allow the grass to just flow into this thing and fill up. And it does fill up pretty fast when you got really thick, healthy grass like we do out here. So removing this thing pretty easy. Before you remove it, you do open up the back. So all the grass just comes out in the back here, and the door will just come right off. So you take that door off, and then you lift this thing, ideally with two hands if you're not holding the camera, but you lift it away from this bracket and then dump it. Not too bad. So this bracket here is how it attaches to the deck. So you'd have to drill two holes through the bracket and through your deck for this thing to attach to. I did actually fact check myself while making this video, and I'm not completely giving you the whole story on how these attachment brackets work, because on Bad Boy mowers, this is how you attach the bracket. Different mowers have different brackets, so you've got to get a hold of Accelerator to get the correct info on how the brackets work with your mowers. Some are radically different than this, so there's a little fact check for you. There's where the grass goes in, obviously, just straight off your deck. So pretty simple design, really rugged, really easy to use, pretty foolproof, no moving parts for people to break. All this thing does is bag grass with no questions asked. Now, of course, this is a very different bagger than people are used to seeing. So whenever people are checking it out at my store, they always have a lot of questions. I'm just going to go through the questions people usually ask me about these things and the answers that I have for those questions, and try to be as real as possible. So the first question people always ask me is, how much grass will these hold? And of course, that's a hard question to answer accurately because it depends on what kind of grass you're shoving in there. Is it really dry? Is it really wet and heavy? Are you just doing leaves? It's hard to tell you exactly how much stuff, like how big of a yard will fit in this thing, or how much of your yard will fit in this thing. And there are two sizes. There's this size, which is a standard, and there's also an XL size, which is longer. It'll fit more grass in it. And there's some trade-offs there that we'll talk about. But long story short, at my place, I had to dump it every time I went through about a 25 by 25 space in my yard. That was about an inch of grass I was cutting away. We were cutting some taller, thicker grass. So I'd mow for 2.5, 3 minutes, and I'd have to go dump this thing. So then, of course, how can you tell when it's full? There's no tube to look at in here that you see filling up with grass. There's no little spinny things. There's no alarm. How do you tell when it's full? And again, that answer is you just got to kind of figure it out. What I found was the front corner of the deck down here, where the grass kind of goes into the chute or goes into the bagger, would start spitting grass out the corner. And that would tell me that this thing was basically full. So yeah, once it's full, it just spits the grass out somewhere else. Is there something in my beard? No? Okay, let's keep going. Now, people always ask me, isn't this thing going to be heavy? And the answer to that is, yeah, it kind of is. Dry weight, just this unit itself on the standard sized unit, not the extra large, is just under 19 pounds when I weighed it. So it's not super light. It's not something you're going to hand to your grandma and tell her to go out and mow with. It weighs more than a cloth bag would, a lot more than a cloth bag would, which is your trade-off for being so stinking heavy duty and robust. Because of course a cloth bag will break down, it'll tear, it'll rot out. This thing is going to last for years and years and years, which is why we see a lot of landscapers using these. But the trade-off is it does weigh a little bit, which is why it has handles on it for you to lift it with 2 hands. So there's your trade-off. It is a little heavy. And when it's full of grass, it's going to be heavier still. Out here, very wet grass, so wet that when I went to dump one bag full of grass, water came out and got all over me. It weighed like almost 50 pounds. That's pretty heavy. So maybe you wait till it's only half full and then dump it, or you got to figure it out. It just depends on your grass, your material. How heavy it's going to be is really dependent on how much moisture is in that material. 50 pounds. Now, another concern I get a lot on these is that it sticks out from the mower, which it certainly does. From the side of the deck, you're sticking out about 18 inches. So, you know, if you've got really narrow gates to go through, you're going to have to take the bagger off the side to get through. That's not unlike a normal bagger, though. Most normal baggers will have a chute or a hose coming out the side, and in my experience, they stick out a similar width. This one may be a little bit wide, and it can certainly run into stuff, and it's not like a soft hose or a tube that'll just squish. You know, if you hit a fence, you're going to know it, but it does stick out a ways. Again, about 18 inches from the side of the deck. So if you got a place like I do, where I'm used to mowing with a 48 or a 50-inch wide deck, just know that some of the spaces you made by planting stuff where you planted them, or made fences where you made fences, or where you put 2 buildings next to each other, maybe you won't be able to squeeze through. This is a 54-inch deck, which is wider than I normally mow with, plus another 18 inches. It might be a little wide for you. So it is something to consider, that extra width, but with any bagging system, you're going to have that width anyway. I have had some concerns too with folks with these, saying it throws dust and grass everywhere. And I could see in dusty conditions, of course, that dust would come out the holes on this thing and fly everywhere. That would be a true concern. Out here, it doesn't get real dusty when you're mowing, so we don't have a problem with dust going everywhere. But they do make dust covers that actually cover your perforations with a mesh, like a fabric mesh, to prevent dust from billowing out of here, because that is a real concern in hotter areas or drier areas, dust coming out. But what about grass? Isn't grass just going to come out of these holes? The short answer is no. When you're cutting your grass, the grass is just going to be longer and thicker than the holes on this bagger, unless you're in a situation like I was. I did have a bunch of like really thin, small chaff coming out the holes of this machine. And it got all over the place. Why was that? Well, before using this bagger, I was running a robotic mower out there to test. It's called a Sunseeker. I've got a video about that. Feel free to look for it on the channel. And it micro mulches. It cuts just a tiny bit of grass off at a time. So I had all this little chaff in the understory of my grass. This thing gets such good suction and vacuum. It picked that stuff up out of the grass and shoved it inside itself, but it was small enough that it did start coming out the holes in here. So using that dust blocker, again, would have been pretty effective. Now, in another case, I had a customer who had never bagged before. They had been doing some mulching, some side discharging, and they had a lot of really dry grass in the understory of their lawn. This thing picked it all up, and it was throwing it out the holes, throwing dust everywhere. So if you've never mowed with a bagger before, or you've been mulching, you're gonna wanna put the dust guards on this thing, at least for your first few mows, so you're not getting dust and small grass everywhere. After you get all that stuff kind of handled, you can take those things off, and then this thing will have even better vacuum than it did while using those dust guards. Another question people have asked me is, does this thing get hung up on stuff? Well, obviously if you hit the side of it, it's not gonna give. This thing's made of metal, but it does have a rounded side, so it'll kind of bounce off of whatever you hit. But what if there's something going underneath it? Will it get hung up? In my experience, no. This thing is attached on the top of the deck, just on a hanger with that little pin looking thing going through it. So it will rotate on that hanger, and it won't pop off because you have that pin acting as a carrier keeping it engaged. So this thing will bump over obstructions pretty well. You've got a few inches of movement here. Hillsides too, if you come down a hillside, the mower's on a flat space and the bagger's on a hillside, I noticed it kind of raising itself up to account for the curvature of that hillside and still bagging grass while it did it, which was pretty interesting. So I didn't notice it getting hung up too bad going forward or reverse. Now, what if you don't bag everywhere? What if you only bag your front yard and the backyard you just cut and throw? What do you do in that instance? Well, you got some choices to make. The first thing you could do is you could just take this thing off and side discharge. You're not going to have your discharge restrictor on the side because your discharge restrictor has to be removed for this thing to be installed. For the rail it sits on to be installed, you can't have a discharge restrictor there as well. Oh, okay, this is future Micah. I'm editing the video right now, even though you're watching the video. I guess maybe I'm past Micah. I don't know how timelines work. I do have a little correction here. There are different mounting brackets and styles for different kinds of mowers. I only know the installation process for the Bad Boy mowers where you need to put a bracket on. There's some brackets that are compatible with side discharges. There's all sorts of different ways these things attach to different mowers because each Accelerator model is made specifically for the mower it goes with. So check with Accelerator to see how this mounting system works for your mower because it might be different than the one I was using. It might be way more convenient. So just fact checking myself here. Okay, back to that video. It's really exciting. I know you want to see the surprise conclusion. So you could just take the bag off and let the grass throw everywhere, and it might kind of get blown back into your face sometimes, but you could do that. Option number two is you could unbolt the rail that this sits on and put back on your discharge restrictor. You know, if you're in a big hurry, it's probably not the best thing to do, but it's something that you could do. I've been thinking about some ideas with pins and stuff to hold this on, but I haven't gotten there yet. Option number three is you could just take the back off this thing and let it just shoot grass out the back, which kind of works. In my place, the grass was so wet that that grass finally just kind of built up inside the bagger unit. It wouldn't discharge out the back anymore. And it was kind of throwing grass everywhere, but it did work. It was like a bazooka shooting grass out the back of the mower, and it sits far enough back that it wasn't blowing back into my face. So you have a few options there, but it is something to think about. So in the end, I think anybody who's bagging could use one of these units successfully. It does all the things that baggers do, and it doesn't have a lot of the downfalls that normal baggers have. It's more robust. It has way more suction than any other bagger I've used, except for turbine baggers. But those turbine or vacuum baggers in our region get so clogged that they're practically useless half the year. And this thing will not clog, and that's the real big benefit, at least in our area, of these Accelerator baggers. So if you're bagging, I think you're an ideal user for this style of bagger. Unless you have problems bending over, picking it up and dumping it. You don't have to pick it up far, but you do have to pick it up a couple inches to dump it. Whereas a standard bagger is a tiny bit lighter. You'd slide the bags out, and I guess you could just drop them on the ground and flip them over. This thing you do have to lift up a couple inches while bending over. So if you have physical limitations, might not be the best thing for you. Also, if you really need to move quickly from bagging to side discharging, might not be the best option, because again, you should use your discharge restrictor, which you would have to reinstall after taking this bagger off and taking the bracket off of your deck that attaches to the bagger, to your mower. Other than that, I think most people would be just fine with one of these. But would I buy one? Nope, I wouldn't. We have just too much grass to mow here. We have 5-6 acres of grass we're mowing. I'm not going to dump this thing 50 times in a day for no reason. I don't care about the grass just being side discharged out the side of my mower. I'd considered it for mowing the front end of our property, but you know what? I just don't care. I just don't care. I just side discharge the grass and that's it. But if I were to bag, yes, I'd buy one. Just at where we're at in our mowing life right now, it wouldn't be good for us, but boy, oh boy, I tell you, this bagger is incredible. It bags better than any bagger I've ever demoed in overall usages. Vacuum baggers are really nice, but this thing, no matter what the weather is, no matter what the conditions are, bags great. And even if you try to overbag and overpack it, there's no problems. You can just empty it out and move on with your life. You're not clogging up an impeller or something. That's all I know. I'll put a link to the Accelerator Industries website in the description of this video. Y'all take it easy. We'll see you around.